The morning Ethan Cole returned home after 15 months in a coma, the world felt unfamiliar, quieter, colder, slightly wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. The gravel under his boots crunched louder than he remembered, each step sending tremors through legs that had forgotten how to carry weight. The doctors had warned him about disorientation, about the strange grief that comes from losing time. But nothing prepared him for the sight waiting at the end of his driveway. A massive wooden sign stood where his mailbox used to be, bold letters reading HOA Community Beach, Public Access. An arrow pointed toward his lake. Ethan froze, his heart hammering against ribs that still ached from months of stillness. He followed the direction of that arrow with his eyes, and something inside him cracked. Strangers were laughing on his shoreline, splashing in water that had been his sanctuary since childhood, dragging coolers across freshly dumped sand that buried the natural shore where his father had taught him to fish. His property looked violated, swallowed by an invisible force that had moved in while he slept between life and death. And standing in the middle of it all, surveying the chaos like a queen on conquered land, was Karen Drayton. She turned as if she felt his gaze burning through the crowd. Her expression shifted rapidly, shock melting into annoyance, then reshaping itself into a bright, sugary smile that never reached her cold eyes. She stepped toward him with open arms, moving through the air as if she owned it. "Oh, Ethan," she said, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that always preceded something bitter. "Welcome home. We've been managing your lake for the community while you were away." Ethan didn't move toward her embrace. His voice came out low and controlled, though his hands trembled at his sides. "My lake, my land, my title deed." Sheriff Tom Mills arrived before Ethan could respond, his cruiser rolling up the gravel drive with familiar reluctance. Karen had called him, of course. Mills stepped out slowly, eyeing Ethan with a mixture of cautious sympathy and professional distance. "Just checking in," Mills said, adjusting his hat. "Karen mentioned there might be some tension." Karen folded her arms, positioning herself between them like royalty watching guards converse about peasant matters. "He's confused, Sheriff. Medical trauma. He doesn't understand the new community guidelines we established." Ethan stared at her, feeling the weight of every word. "My lake, my land, my title deed." Mills tapped his brim uncomfortably. "Let's all slow down here. Ethan, things changed while you were gone." "Not legally," Ethan said quietly.
Karen's glare sharpened, and for the first time, Ethan sensed something deeper beneath her confident facade. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of losing control. That evening, Ethan walked the shoreline alone, while the beach still buzzed with activity. Children screaming, adults drinking from red cups, music thumping from portable speakers. The sand the HOA had dumped was uneven and spilling into the water like an open wound. But something else caught his attention, something everyone else had missed. A small chain of boundary markers had been ripped out and discarded carelessly. One of them still had a piece of Karen's signature HOA blue ribbon attached. This wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, organized, coordinated. Someone had engineered this takeover with precision. Ethan crouched, tracing his fingers along the disturbed earth, when a soft voice emerged from the tree line behind him. "Ethan, over here." It was Mr. Rowan, the HOA vice president. The older man was nervous, sweating, despite the cool evening air, breathing like he had run miles to reach this moment of confession. "They weren't supposed to go this far," Rowan whispered urgently. "Karen pushed it through. She lied to the board, told them you were never waking up, that your land was practically abandoned, and we had a duty to utilize it." Ethan's blood ran hot beneath his skin. Rowan continued, his voice trembling with the weight of guilt.
She used emergency powers, rushed the beach project through before anyone could question it. The board members are terrified of her. But Ethan, she's building something much bigger than a beach. What? Rowan swallowed hard, glancing back toward the lights. A private marina, funded entirely by selling access to your shoreline. That night, Ethan stood on his porch staring at the lake now illuminated by string lights the HOA had wrapped around his trees without permission. People danced on his land. Boats he had never seen sat docked on his water. Karen walked the sand like a ruler inspecting her kingdom, and when she looked up toward his house, she met his eyes directly. Her smirk communicated everything words couldn't. You are gone. I took it. Try and stop me. Ethan felt the anger settle into something different. Not fire, but steel. Controlled and sharp. I'm awake now, and I'm taking everything back. The next morning, Ethan walked into town and requested the county records. The clerk hesitated when she saw his name, recognition flickering across her face, but after a long pause, she slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside were aerial maps stamped with HOA permits, construction timelines, and environmental waivers. But the real blow came at the bottom of the stack, a blueprint labeled Drayton Lakeside Marina, Phase 1 Construction. Karen Drayton's signature was bold and confident, claiming his shoreline as if it had always been hers to claim. She wasn't building for the community. She was building an empire. And she had used emergency paperwork meant for genuine crises to justify her hostile takeover. The question now wasn't how she had done it. It was why she was so desperate for his lake. When Ethan returned home, he found someone sitting on his porch. Claire Cole, his younger sister. The last time she had seen him, he was on life support, machines breathing for him while doctors offered diminishing hope. Now she hugged him, like she was terrified he might vanish again if she let go. You shouldn't have come back alone, Claire whispered into her shoulder. People in town are talking. They say Karen practically owns this lake now. They say you don't stand a chance. Ethan stared at the sand-covered shoreline over her shoulder. Not for long. Claire followed his gaze, and her face hardened with familiar Cole stubbornness. She took everything from you while you were fighting for your life. Ethan, don't let her win. His jaw tightened with resolve. I didn't wake up from a coma to lose my home.
That evening, Ethan climbed up to the roof and installed the device that would change everything. A military-grade motion tracker he had used during his engineering days. It scanned movement, counted entries, and mapped heat signatures through foliage with precision. Within minutes of activating it, the soft beep began. Trespass count, 34. Karen's beach day wasn't a one-time event. People were pouring onto his land constantly, dozens more each passing hour. 35. 36. The lake wasn't being used, it was being invaded. Around midnight, the counter spiked dramatically. 52, 53, 54. Ethan stepped outside, staying in the shadows, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. From the far end of the shoreline, flashlight beams flickered like searching eyes. He crept closer, silent and controlled. 3 HOA contractors were hammering stakes into the ground, additional fencing, marking off even more of his land for the marina expansion. And standing behind them, arms folded with imperial satisfaction, was Karen herself, whispering instructions. Extend the boundary here. We need the marina zone cleared by next week. The investors are getting impatient. Ethan recorded everything. Every whispered word, every unauthorized measurement, every violation of his property rights. Then Karen froze mid-sentence, turned slowly. Her flashlight beam traced the tree line like a blade searching for prey. Someone's watching, she murmured to her workers. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe, but she felt him there, like a predator sensing another predator in the darkness. The next morning, Sheriff Mills parked at the dock, looking tired and conflicted. I got calls, he muttered, stepping out of his cruiser. HOA says you're harassing their workers, acting erratically. Ethan showed him the video on his phone. Karen ordering midnight construction on private land, trespassing, illegal boundary expansion, all of it, time-stamped and clear. Mill's face changed completely. The professional distance dissolved into genuine shock. "This is bad," he whispered. "Ethan, she lied to me. She told me you signed over temporary access before your accident. I never signed anything." Mills took off his hat, rubbing his forehead with weathered hands. "If she's falsifying property lines, that's criminal. That's not HOA politics anymore." Ethan stepped closer, keeping his voice steady. "Help me stop her." Mills nodded slowly, something shifting in his tired eyes. "You get me solid proof that will hold up in court, and I'll bring the entire HOA down myself." Night fell again, but this time Ethan wasn't hiding. He prepared his land like a battlefield: solar spotlights, motion-triggered cameras, hidden microphones, and a digital geofencing grid that mapped every inch of shoreline with mathematical precision. Claire watched nervously from the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the chill. "What exactly are you planning?" Ethan checked the system connections, his face illuminated by the laptop screen. "I'm going to catch them. Every trespass, every illegal construction act, every lie documented and timestamped." "Then what?" Ethan looked out at the sparkling lake, the water that held his childhood memories and his father's ashes scattered near the old dock. "Then I'm going to take back everything they stole, publicly, legally, and permanently." Because Ethan understood something Karen didn't. Once the trespass numbers reached a certain threshold, the county would be forced to intervene regardless of political pressure, and Karen's entire empire would collapse under the weight of her own arrogance. All he needed was one more night. The next day, Ethan found Mr. Rowan pacing near the tree line, like a man being hunted by his own conscience. When Rowan saw him approach, he rushed over with desperate urgency. "They're planning something tonight. Karen's furious. She suspects someone is spying on her operations. She wants to expand the beach one final time before the county inspector comes next week." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "She knows I'm watching." Rowan swallowed hard, his face pale. "She doesn't know how much you've already documented. But when Karen gets paranoid, she becomes truly dangerous. She destroys evidence, threatens people, makes problems disappear. Why are you helping me?" Rowan looked out at the lake, at the chaos that used to be peaceful water, at the shoreline that used to be natural and wild. "Because this isn't a community anymore. It's a kingdom built on lies, and I'm tired of being a servant to a tyrant." He pressed a small flash drive into Ethan's hand, his fingers trembling. "Everything you need to expose her completely is on this: financial records, forged documents, email chains." When Ethan asked what specifically he would find, Rowan whispered one sentence that chilled him to his core. "Karen forged the vote, but she also forged your medical status. She told everyone you were brain dead." Ethan plugged the drive into his laptop with steady hands, despite the rage building in his chest. The files loaded slowly, each one more damning than the last. HOA meeting minutes claiming Ethan was in a permanent vegetative state with no hope of recovery. Fabricated doctor's notes Karen had submitted as evidence. A board resolution declaring his land functionally abandoned and subject to community reclamation. Emails to the county requesting emergency shoreline control, citing public safety concerns. And finally, a financial spreadsheet showing thousands of dollars in incoming marina membership pre-sales. Money already collected for access to property she didn't own. Karen wasn't building for the community's benefit. She was building a private empire on land she had convinced everyone was ownerless. Claire covered her mouth, horrified by what she was reading over his shoulder. "They were celebrating on your lake because they genuinely believed you would never wake up. She made sure of it." Ethan stared at the glowing evidence. His lake wasn't stolen by accident or opportunity. It was stolen by careful, calculated design. And Karen had bet everything, her reputation, her position, her financial future, on Ethan staying unconscious forever. But he was awake now, and she was running out of time. That evening, the geofence system lit up like an emergency alarm. Trespass count, 88, 93, 104. Ethan ran outside. Headlights cut through the darkness. Trucks lined the road. Dozens of workers unloaded lumber, fencing materials, and barrels of packed sand with urgent efficiency. Karen stood at the center of the chaos, shouting orders like a general preparing for a final decisive battle. "We need the new pier section completed by sunrise, no excuses. Move." Ethan filmed everything from the shadows, documenting the illegal construction with trembling hands. Then, something unexpected happened. Karen snapped her head toward his house, eyes narrowing with predatory instinct. She whispered something to a worker nearby. The man nodded and began walking toward Ethan's fence line, carrying a crowbar. Claire grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him back. "Don't go out there. Not yet. We need more." He clenched his jaw, retreating into the darkness against every instinct screaming for confrontation. Karen scanned the lake perimeter as if she could smell rebellion in the night air. "She's escalating," Ethan muttered. "No," Claire whispered. "She's getting desperate. Desperate people make fatal mistakes." At 3:12 a.m., Ethan heard the groaning crack of wood splitting under force. His boundary fence? He sprinted to the window and froze at what he witnessed. HOA contractors were tearing it down, section by section, working with methodical efficiency under portable floodlights. Karen supervised from the center of the destruction, her voice carrying across the water with triumphant authority. "No more private shoreline. The marina expansion begins now. Sheriff or no sheriff, this is happening tonight." Ethan felt his blood boil, every muscle tensing with the urge to charge outside and confront her directly. But his fingers found his phone instead. He hit record. Claire stood beside him, trembling with outrage. "They're destroying their property in plain sight. They don't even care anymore." "Not just destroying property," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "They're destroying their own future. Because this moment, this exact act of vandalism constituted the county's most serious violation. Demolition of private structures without permit carried mandatory investigation, criminal charges, financial penalties that would bankrupt the HOA entirely. All of it captured in high definition. All of it logged with GPS coordinates. All of it time-stamped with legal precision. Karen didn't realize it yet, but she had just handed him everything he needed. Headlights cut through the misty shoreline 20 minutes later. Sheriff Mills stepped out of his cruiser, fury already burning in his eyes as he surveyed the destruction. "Karen," he said, his voice low and dangerous in a way Ethan had never heard before. "Why am I getting calls at 3 in the morning about illegal demolition on private property?" Karen straightened her shoulders, smoothing her jacket, as if preparing for a board meeting rather than a confrontation with law enforcement. "Oh, Sheriff, this is an internal HOA matter, not a county concern." Mills pointed at the destroyed fence, the splintered wood scattered across the ground like bones. "That's private property. That's criminal destruction. That's my jurisdiction." Ethan approached from behind the sheriff, holding his phone with the screen facing outward. "I have the entire operation on video. Every order she gave, every section they demolished." Karen's face drained of color for the first time since Ethan had returned. The mask slipped, revealing something desperate and cornered beneath. Mills radioed dispatch with calm authority. "Get me county code enforcement. Emergency response. Now." Karen took a step forward, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "This land belongs to the community. The board voted." "No," Mills interrupted firmly.
This land belongs to Ethan Cole. It has always belonged to Ethan Cole, and you have crossed every legal line that exists." Karen didn't flinch. Instead, her lips curved into something resembling a smile, cold and knowing. "Not if I change the lines," she whispered. Mills froze. Ethan felt ice spread through his veins. What did that mean? The county truck arrived within minutes, 2 inspectors climbing out with flashlights and clipboards, their faces tense with professional alertness. "Who called this in?" the senior inspector asked. Mills gestured toward Ethan. "We have documented illegal construction, boundary destruction, and potentially forged permits. The situation has escalated beyond HOA authority." Karen laughed softly, a sound that made everyone pause. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded document with theatrical confidence. "Actually, gentlemen, the boundaries were officially redrawn months ago. This land falls partially within HOA jurisdiction now." She handed the inspector a map stamped with county seals, a map showing the lake bisected by new property lines that had never existed before Ethan's accident. Ethan's stomach dropped as the inspector examined the document. "These records appear official," the man said slowly, confusion crossing his weathered face. "That map is fake," Ethan said, stepping forward. "Those boundaries were never changed. I never authorized any modification." Karen's smile widened with predatory satisfaction. "Prove it." And that's when Ethan understood the full scope of her conspiracy. Karen hadn't just forged HOA documents. She had someone inside the county office itself, a ghost ally, a hidden accomplice who had been rewriting maps and rewriting truth while Ethan slept between worlds. But Ethan still had Rowan's flash drive, and on that drive was the one file Karen never wanted anyone to see. He opened his laptop, fingers moving with deliberate calm despite his racing heart. "I think everyone needs to see this." The video played across the screen, Karen walking into the county office long after closing hours, a clerk shutting blinds against prying eyes, Karen pulling out an envelope so thick it barely folded. The handshake, the stamp pressed against documents, the same map she now presented as legitimate evidence. The inspectors stiffened visibly. "Is that Robert Chen?" the senior inspector asked, recognizing his colleague. "Is that our office?" "It is," Mills confirmed, his voice heavy with grim satisfaction. "Bribery, document falsification, abuse of public authority, conspiracy to commit property theft." Karen's confidence shattered like glass. For the first time, real fear flickered across her features. "You don't understand what I was trying to accomplish. I had to redraw the lines. Your lake is the only viable access point for the marina development. The community needs this." "The community," Ethan interrupted quietly, "never asked you to steal my land." Rowan stepped forward from the shadows, where he had been watching. She planned a private membership club. Expensive, exclusive. She was selling access before she even owned the property. She would have made hundreds of thousands of dollars. The inspectors exchanged weighted glances, the kind that preceded formal investigations and criminal referrals. Karen's empire wasn't collapsing slowly. It had just imploded completely. She lunged forward and grabbed the forged map from the inspector's hands. "You can't prove the envelope contained money. Maybe it was just paperwork. Maybe Robert made an honest mistake with the stamps." Mills calmly pulled a second document from his pocket, unfolding it with deliberate slowness. "We already checked. Robert Chen confessed 30 minutes ago when we called him. He's being processed for booking as we speak. He gave us everything. Dates, amounts, instructions. all of it traced back to you." Karen's face contorted with something between rage and disbelief.
Rowan looked at her with undisguised disgust. "You ruined everything we built. Years of community trust destroyed for your greed." Karen spun on him, her voice rising to a shriek. "I built this community. I kept everyone in line. Without me, there is no order, no standards, no property values." "Without you," Ethan said quietly, stepping forward until he stood directly before her, "there's no control. That's what you're really afraid of losing." Karen glared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with cornered fury. "You should have stayed in that coma. Everyone was happier when you were gone. Everyone was grateful for what I was building. You're the problem, Ethan. You've always been the problem." The entire shoreline went silent. Even the workers had stopped, watching the confrontation with uncomfortable fascination. Sheriff Mills stepped between them, his hand resting casually on his belt. "That's enough. Karen Drayton, you're being detained pending formal investigation. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." He guided her toward the cruiser with professional efficiency. She went without physical resistance, but her eyes never left Ethan's face, burning with hatred that would never fully extinguish. The car door clicked shut. The workers dispersed like startled birds, abandoning their equipment and disappearing into the darkness. The portable floodlights flickered off one by one, leaving the sand-covered shoreline looking wounded and abandoned under the pale moonlight. The county inspectors walked the damaged perimeter, silently documenting every violation with cameras and measuring tools. 117 documented trespasses, 117 counts of illegal entry, plus property destruction, conspiracy, bribery, and fraud. This is going to prosecution. Claire approached Ethan carefully, as if afraid he might shatter from the weight of everything that had happened. "It's over," she whispered. "You won." But Ethan didn't feel victorious. He felt exhausted, hollow, relieved in a way that ached. Rowan walked up slowly, his hands still trembling from the night's events. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have stopped her months ago when I first suspected what she was planning. I was a coward." Ethan looked at the older man, no anger remaining, just the tired truth of survival. "You stopped her tonight. That's what matters." Rowan's eyes glistened with something like redemption. The next morning, Ethan stood on the HOA's meeting lawn with Sheriff Mills and both county inspectors, flanking him like an honor guard. The board members had gathered nervously, none daring to sit in Karen's vacant president's chair. They looked diminished somehow, smaller than before. "We didn't know she forged documents," one woman mumbled, wringing her hands. "We thought you were never ever waking up," another man whispered, unable to meet Ethan's eyes. "The doctor she quoted made it sound hopeless. We just followed her lead. She was so confident, so certain she was right." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their collective failure, but understanding its origin.
"Following someone isn't a crime," he said calmly. "Ignoring the law is. Choosing not to ask questions when something feels wrong, that's a choice. Remember that going forward." The senior inspector stepped forward with official authority. "The HOA will undergo immediate state review. All lake access is suspended indefinitely pending investigation. Ethan Cole retains full property control effective immediately. Any member who attempts contact or trespass will face individual prosecution." The board members exhaled with shaky relief, grateful to escape with warnings rather than charges. "As for Karen Drayton," the inspector finished, "she has been permanently removed from all HOA authority. Her membership is revoked. Her property rights within this community are under review." Claire leaned toward Ethan, her voice barely audible. "She's going to lose everything she built." "Good. She built it on stolen ground," Ethan replied quietly. The next evening, as Ethan restored sections of the broken fence with his own hands, driving nails into fresh lumber, feeling the honest ache of physical work, Sheriff Mills' cruiser rolled up the gravel drive once more. Karen sat in the back seat, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. The imperial fury drained from her posture, leaving something diminished and gray. "They're charging her with 12 counts, Mills said, stepping out and leaning against his door. "Forgery, criminal trespass, bribery of public officials, destruction of private property, fraud, conspiracy, and intentional misrepresentation of legal documents. The prosecutor is considering additional charges based on the financial records." Karen's gaze found Ethan through the glass. She stared at him as if trying to incinerate him with her final reserves of hatred. "You think this lake is truly yours?" she called through the glass, her voice muffled but venomous. "You think you've won something meaningful? Fine, take your water and your trees, but remember, everyone in this community loved my beach more than they ever loved you. They'll resent you for taking it away." Ethan set down his hammer and walked toward the cruiser, stopping just close enough to be heard clearly. "I don't need them to love me. I just need the truth to matter. And it does." Mills shut the rear door with a definitive click. Karen's reign ended with that small, ordinary sound. Her kingdom dissolved into paperwork and evidence bags. Her power evaporated like morning mist over the lake she had tried to steal. Sunrise painted the lake in gold and silver the following morning. County trucks hauled away the sand Karen had dumped, revealing the natural shoreline beneath, muddy and disturbed, but healing. The illegal pier was dismantled board by board, each piece catalogued as evidence. Workers rebuilt the boundary fence stronger than before, with proper permits and surveyed lines. And the lake, Ethan's lake, slowly returned to its original stillness. The water cleared as the disrupted sediment settled. Birds returned to trees that had been strung with party lights. Fish surfaced near the old dock where Ethan's father had taught him patience and persistence decades ago.
"These are the corrected surveys and maps," he said, extending them with both hands like an offering. "Your lake, your land, every boundary verified and recorded properly. No loopholes remaining, no way for anyone to challenge your ownership ever again." Ethan accepted the documents with steady hands, feeling their weight as something more than paper. For the first time since waking in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and strangers and the terrifying absence of lost time, the world felt right, balanced, true. That night, Ethan sat by the lake alone as the moon rose above the tree line. Silver light reflected on water smooth as dark glass. No footprints marred the natural shore, no music disturbed the cricket songs, no foreign boats intruded on the stillness, no stolen territory remained to reclaim. Just peace. The peace he had dreamed about during those 15 months of darkness, when some part of him had clung to life specifically for this, for home, for water, for the place where his memories lived. Claire joined him eventually, settling onto the weathered dock boards at his side. They sat in comfortable silence for a long while, listening to the lake breathe. "What happens now?" she finally asked. Ethan considered the question carefully, watching moonlight dance across the gentle ripples. He thought about everything he had lost: time, trust,
the naive belief that neighbors would protect what wasn't theirs to take. He thought about everything he had regained: his land, his purpose, the knowledge that truth could still triumph over power when someone refused to surrender. "Now," he said softly, "I start living again. On my own terms, in my own time." A gentle breeze moved across the lake, carrying away the last shadows of Karen's reign like dead leaves swept from a doorstep. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Somewhere in the town, lawyers prepared cases and evidence mounted. Somewhere in a cell, a fallen queen contemplated the ruins of her ambition. But here, on this shore, there was only stillness, only home, only the patient water that had waited 15 months for its true guardian to return. Ethan breathed deeply, really breathed, filling his lungs with night air that tasted like pine and freedom and second chances. The lake was his again. And so finally was his life.